familiar face and airplane at the flying cruise end is this 1951 L-19 Birddog, and I'm with Bill Finney from Muncie, Indiana. Bill, you've been around planes a long time, and we appreciate you bringing it over to the flying end each year. How did this airplane come into your life?
Well, I flew bird dogs in flight school when I was in the Army, and had a lot of fun flying it, really enjoyed the airplane. And I used to have a Cessna 172 that I could take my wife and 3 boys flying in. And we kind of outgrew it. I couldn't afford anything that would haul 5 or 6 people, so I decided I'd rather have a bird dog like I'd flown in the Army. So we found this one in Trade-A-Plane in Redding, California, and bought it and flew it home.
What kind of mission would an airplane like this do?
They would go out and scout the territory looking for the enemy. They could use them for photography, for mapping, for in Vietnam they put rockets on them so that they could mark targets and show the jets where they needed to be bombing.
You've been around airplanes all your life. When did you learn to fly?
I flew with my dad, like you said, from ever since I can remember, like 3 years old. I remember the airport in Mulberry, Indiana, where he used to go and rent J3 Cubs and fly them a lot. When I was 16 years old and a few months, got his instructor rating. And I said, okay, now you can teach me how to fly. And that was the first that I had ever really even thought about learning to fly.
And then you went through high school and Uncle Sam called.
Yeah, I got drafted. I was going to college at Purdue, but I got behind on the hours, so they drafted me. They sent me to Fort Polk, Louisiana, because they said that was the part of the United States that was the most like Vietnam, and all warrant officer pilots went to Vietnam. This was in 1969. And
you were already a fixed-wing pilot when you got in the Army.
They said anyone that has any pilot ratings and any amount of flying time and has proof of it, they can apply for fixed-wing training. So I had my logbook and my pilot's license and about 86 hours, and at that time that was enough to get me into fixed wing.
And your mission was surveillance and finding targets. Your father certainly had an influence in your flying life. Some of the special memories flying with your dad.
Well, from the early training was when I was flying in the Ironka camp. Of course, he's in the back seat, I'm in the front, and I wasn't very good at directional control on the ground when we were taking off. And he's back there saying, keep her straight, keep her straight, keep her straight. And I'm wandering all over the runway, and it goes to the right, and I push the pedal to the left, and eventually it starts coming left, but then it goes too far and all that. And he's, keep her straight, keep her straight. And one day I just got mad. I just stomped on the rudder pedal, and all at once it straightened up just right away. And then it started the other way, and I stomped on the pedal again. Not only did the airplane straighten up, but it was a lot quieter in the back seat. So,
been looking through your album, Bill, and there's a special picture of you and your mother and your dad in there. What's that all about?
Well, when I was in Vietnam, they gave out air medals for each 50 hours of flying, and when you hit the 50-hour mark over there, they awarded you the medal, and they did a ceremony and gave it to you and all that. And then, of course, they had to wait until the end of your tour to know how many air medals you would actually get. But whenever I came home from Vietnam, they discharged me out. I had like 20 months left to serve, and they said, we don't need warrant officers anymore, so you can go home. And so I never got my air medals that I had earned. And I would probably, it had been 30 years after I came home from Vietnam. I was talking to one of my buddies that had been a colonel in the Air Force up there at Oshkosh, and we were talking about the air medals and that, and I said, yeah, I should have got a bunch of them when I got home, but they never did it. And he said, yeah, they didn't give me mine either, but he said, I don't have any of the paperwork anymore. And I said, well, I've got all my paperwork from, all the hours that I flew. And he says, well, make copies of it and send it to me. So I made copies of that. Lo and behold, I got a letter from the governor's office in Indiana telling me to be at the City Hall a certain day, certain time, and a representative of the governor, which it turned out to be a young lady, came and presented me with the 14 air medals that I should have gotten in Vietnam 30 years earlier.
And Mom and Dad were there.
And Mom and Dad got to be there. That was kind of emotional because Dad had never seen anything like that before, and he wasn't able to be there when I got my wings or my officer bars or anything like that. So it was pretty special.
Mike Finney has joined us, and you guys grew up around airplanes and flying. And Bill, any remembrances of when you two boys were young? Some of your flying activities?
Well, I'm 7 years older than Mike, and I was just going through flight training when he was learning to fly, and he soloed on his 16th birthday, so he was still like 15, but he could fly the airplane in that, and we were down at Newcastle flying a Cherokee, and he wanted to show me what he could do, so he got in the left seat, and I got in the right seat, and we took off and went around the pattern. He did a real great job, and so when we got back on the ground, I said, okay, I'll take it now and show you the Army way of doing this. And so he said, okay. So I took off and climbed out to about 500 feet, and he was looking around, and he says, well, I don't see anything too different yet. And I said, just wait. And so I turned crosswind, and he looked around, and he said, I still don't see anything too different. Well, then I turned downwind about probably half or less distance than what he had gone. And he says, you're in kind of close. And I said, just wait. And when I got to the end of the runway, I pulled the power completely off, grabbed the first notch of flaps, turned base, grabbed another notch of flaps, turned final, grabbed the last notch of flaps, and landed. And he goes, wow, because he would fly a typical civilian pattern of pretty wide. So it's kind of a revelation for him.
You got any way to defend yourself, Mike?
That sounds right to me. Yeah, you know how when they're a student, whenever you start out, they don't fly the way an experienced pilot does. So, obviously we fly a little bit different once we attain some experience and everything. And it was definitely being able to see experience at work against somebody just learning to fly, and maybe see where you're going to be in a few years with a little more experience. So it was a fun deal. We always had a good time flying together.
That's wonderful. Mike, you had to be in high school when your brother was off in Vietnam. You're back home. Can you remember what it was like, wondering what was going on with your brother over there?
Oh yeah, actually, what we did back then, we didn't have the technology that you do with the computers. We got a cassette tape recorder, and we'd do like tape letters and stuff and talk. And I was building airplanes and stuff, model airplanes, and some of that stuff I would have liked to have his hands-on experience helping me. So I would take those tape recordings and stuff and tell him what I was doing and everything, and send them off. And then he'd say, well, what you need to do is this, and he'd offer advice back and forth. So we were still in the game of the airplane business as usual, pretty much.
What's your remembrance when he came home?
That was a good time. It was good to make sure that he was, he made it back, because I know a lot of them that didn't.
Bill, we want to thank you for your contribution to the Flying Cruise-In every year, bringing this airplane, and especially your service to us in the military and in Vietnam. It's guys like you that make our country great, and we just appreciate that.
You're very welcome.